Hola, buenas tardes. Nos da gusto saludarlos. Hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial, el embajador de Estados Unidos en México. Aunque la mayoría de la conversación probablemente fluye en inglés, trataremos de hacerlo de una forma que todos lo puedan entender, habla inglesa y habla español. Bueno, pues de esta forma agradecerle también a nuestros aliados muy especiales como EY, Dow, 3M, La Moderna y Constellation Brands. También agradecerle a todo el equipo de la American Society, organización fundada en 1942 por el entonces embajador George S. Messersmith, con el propósito de representar, unificar a toda la comunidad americana. Hoy el American Society representa miles de empresas que están creando buenos trabajos en México, asociaciones civiles no lucrativas norteamericanas que apoyan a mexicanos y a mexicanas, y de igual forma a millones hoy en la comunidad americana que están radicando en México. Hola, buenas tardes, nuevamente en un programa más del American Society, y hoy con el gusto y el placer de contar con unos invitados muy especiales, con el embajador de Estados Unidos en México, sin duda un amigo de México, un amigo de Estados Unidos, y su bella familia, con Caroline, con Nathan, con Julia, que todos nos acompañan, pero aún más especial para mí, pues que tengo a mi co-anfitriona, una mujer que queremos, no nada más yo, pero queremos muchísimo, una historiadora magnífica, una persona muy reconocida, TV host y TV personality, pero aún más importante, nuestra presidenta del comité de eventos y miembro de nuestro consejo directivo. Raquel, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias. Thank you for hosting here this great interview.
Muchísimas gracias. Y bueno, pues, embajador, buenas tardes. Nos da gusto tenerlo por acá y aprovechar su tiempo y sin duda que nos platique pues de ustedes, su familia. Muchas veces lo escuchamos hablar de la relación bilateral, de todos sus aspectos, sin duda, que son tan complejos. Me gustaría empezar con un tema importante y creo yo que es vital, que a veces no se nota, y es el gran trabajo que hacen tantas instituciones no lucrativas norteamericanas en México, y con el ejemplo de nuestro querido miembro del Consejo, pues que acaba de fallecer, pero gran ejemplo para todos, Frank Devlin, que también usted tenía muy bonita relación con él, y nos pudiera platicar un poco de todo ese esfuerzo de las asociaciones no lucrativas que se hace en México.
Gracias, Larry. Sí, déjame en primer lugar reconocer la gran obra de Frank, de toda una vida, desde su comienzo en Ciudad Juárez, a los 8 años comenzando a vender dulces. Él era un empresario y emprendedor y promotor absolutamente natural. Así era Frank. Y yo subí anoche un tweet expresando mi gran pésame a su familia, y realmente me conmovió la cantidad de respuestas que recibí de gente describiendo las obras filantrópicas de Frank, que él fue un hombre muy humilde y nunca me había contado de lo que él hacía, pero parece que él y su empresa, las ópticas Devlin, apoyaban mucho a la gente de escasos recursos con problemas de visión. Les daban anteojos, arreglaban los anteojos y se los regalaban a la gente. Así que yo creo que Frank es un gran ejemplo y una gran inspiración para toda nuestra comunidad de la cooperación, no solamente a nivel gubernamental, pero también, como lo acabas de decir, a nivel empresarial y personal. Y ahora lo vemos también en la pandemia, que no solamente el gobierno estadounidense ha apoyado a México, pero también empresas como la General Motors, que convirtió su planta en Toluca a una fábrica de mascarillas para el uso aquí en México, y las empresas estadounidenses que hicieron donaciones para el establecimiento del hospital de COVID en el centro City Banamex, City Banamex, Walmart, Goldman Sachs, una variedad de empresas muy, muy conocidas de Estados Unidos que apoyaron este proyecto porque tienen presencia aquí en México, muchos de ellos, desde un siglo o más. Y para nosotros la relación, cuando hablamos de la relación bilateral, no solamente estamos hablando de la relación entre gobiernos, sino las relaciones a todo nivel y a un nivel muy personal. Hay tantos lazos entre nuestros países y te agradezco por realmente destacar este punto tan importante que hay un apoyo muy grande y un compromiso muy, muy grande con México de parte del sector privado de Estados Unidos.
Raquel, por favor.
Bueno, gracias, señor embajador, y me voy a dirigir a Caroline, a Nathaniel y a Julia, porque tener a toda la familia, it's out of this world. And I'm starting in English because I know they're not as good in Spanish as Mr. Ambassador. And my first question would be, what has been your great experiences of our country, of Mexico?
Who wants to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, I really enjoyed going to the American school. I mean, that's where I spent, most of my time. And I just found that everybody, someone coming in the middle of their senior year is kind of disruptive, I guess. And everyone from the teachers to the students, everybody was so welcoming and really made me feel like I was at home. And I think that kind of perfectly exemplifies Mexican culture.
Right. I'd like to echo, I felt exactly the same way. When we came in December, Chris and I were at Jamaica Market, and it turned out that this woman came up to me and said, oh, this is where you need to get your oranges, and this is where you need to get your grapefruit, and this is where you should go to get your flowers. But that has been everywhere I go. The Mexican people are so warm and welcoming, and I felt like I had a new best friend right away. And it turned out her son also went to the American school.
And is one of my friends there.
And now is a good friend of Nat's. So.
And she had no idea who you were. I mean, you were some random güerita at the market.
Oh, and I have to say, the Jamaica Market is really one of my favorite places to go in Mexico City. Julia, what are some of your thoughts?
Okay, I again also agree with them that the Mexicans are just so welcoming, and coming in the middle of the year again is hard. I mean, I don't want to repeat the exact same thing that Nat said, but they are so nice. And another thing that's great, again, I was going to talk about the markets.
All right, well, you can talk about the markets too.
Okay, well, the markets, just all the colors and all the fun things that you can do, like very different from the United States in the sense that we're all kind of together in the market, and you can pick other things, and there's food, and there's these flowers,
Piñatas.
Right.
All very fun.
That's wonderful. And Mr. Ambassador, tell us, I mean, you and the family have traveled within Mexico quite a bit during these last few months. And I've heard you say one time after another that you love traveling around Mexico, and naturally once everything goes back to as normal as it can, you want to start doing it again. But tell us one that comes to mind that you and your family really enjoyed from all of these trips that you've taken.
Yeah, I think once this pandemic is over, you guys are not going to see me anymore in Mexico City. It's going to be bye-bye. I'm going to be the ambassador of the interior in Zacatecas and San Luis Potosí and Yucatan and Baja California Sur. So, I'm glad we're getting this interview done while I'm still here in Mexico City. the trips to the interior are incredible. And I'll tell you, the one that stands out in my mind the most is the trip that we made to Michoacan for Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
It's just a very special part of Mexico in terms of the folklore and the traditions of that part. I think the movie Coco was actually loosely based on an old woman from Michoacan. And, that's where they really go all out for the Day of the Dead celebrations. So we were in Morelia, which is a lovely colonial city. Then we went to Pátzcuaro and the Zona Lacustre to, really see the celebrations on the Day of the Dead itself. At night, people go to the cemetery. Everywhere you go, there's the Cempasúchil. The whole state, I think, was covered in orange. And Caroline and Julia were still living in the United States then, but came down to Mexico to go on that trip with me. And I think that was something that we all will remember for the rest of our lives. Just going out on the lake there in Pátzcuaro and seeing the fishermen with their butterfly nets, eating the little fish from the lake, and the artesanías of that area. We bought one of those glazed pineapples from Michoacan, and the people were very, very warm there. And we actually met the woman that they say that inspired the movie Coco, and it was just a very special visit. That whole Day of the Dead time, I think, is a very special time here in Mexico. It's such a unique celebration that we don't have in the United States, and I have to say that stands out to me as a great trip, particularly because I was able to enjoy it with my wife and our daughter.
And I have to say, I think that we will always celebrate the Day of the Dead as a family. And I think that we will also have an altar and look back and honor our ancestors. And it's a really wonderful celebration. And it's a nice way to remember those that were with us at one time. Julian?
You're absolutely right. And I actually started early. I set up an altar down here in the ambassador's residence at the beginning of October, because I wanted to stretch out the celebration. I thought it was such a great tradition. And so I got all the flowers and the photographs and set up our altar. By the way, the Feria del Alfeñique in Toluca is a great event. They have all these vendors all around the plaza in Toluca. And so if folks have not made it to that event, it's the whole month of October, I think. It is definitely worthwhile. So I bought all kinds of little sugar skulls and other candies. So our altar was completely tricked out at home for Day of the Dead. And I posted the photos in early October. And then people said, oh, no, you're not supposed to do it this early. You're supposed to do it just a day or two before Day of the Dead. But I said, no. I don't know how many Day of the Deads I'll get to celebrate in Mexico. So I'm taking full advantage of the situation. And I enjoyed it for the whole month of October.
Juliet, did you like getting your face done?
Oh yes, that was very fun. The people there just let me get my face done, and it was so beautiful. Yeah, like a Katrina. It was so beautiful, and they're so nice, and I just loved. It was great, yeah, because it's so unlike anything I could do here, of course. Yeah, okay. Just walking around the streets too in Michoacan. I definitely agree with Dad that was a great experience a trip that I've never experienced before, and it'd be great if we can go back.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear you guys, because really Mexico is one of a kind. But my question now is, from all your experiences, what is your favorite food in Mexico?
Okay.
That's not easy.
Yeah, Matt has become.
Well, my favorite food used to be the tacos El Pastor. I like those a lot. But I recently went vegan, so I have not been able to eat those tacos. So I think my favorite food is now the stuffed peppers, just without meat. So like beans, tomatoes, onions, all in the stuffed pepper. I really like that.
Chiles rellenos. That's what we call it.
Yeah.
What about you, Carl?
I like all of the fruits and vegetables, which I feel here in the States, we just can't get the same quality. Like going to Jamaica and buying fresh coconuts and getting all the lettuce and all the vegetables and the honey pineapple this year was amazing. What's the orange?
Mamey.
Mamey.
Yeah, mamey.
It is incredible. Julie, what are some of your favorites?
Well, there was one and Nat took it. So I'm just gonna say it again. Tacos al pastor. I remember going to the Zocalo and getting to eat at this little shop, and I ate those tacos, and I just felt so new. I felt like a new person. Like they were that good. They were that good. I mean, every time I go to Zocalo now, every time I go to the Zocalo now, I always try to get those because they're just that good.
For Mexico,
Literally life changing.
to have mole poblano, I don't know if you tasted, but it's also a delicacy that I propose you next time to try it.
Okay,
In
okay.
Puebla, right?
Right, and in September. So I saw, by the way, that you did your trip to Xochimilco and beautiful pictures. How was Xochimilco, Mr. Ambassador?
It was magical. It's one of those places that is so Mexican. There's really nothing else like it in the world when you are floating on one of the trajineras and another one goes by with the mariachi band and the people come up and they want to sell you the elote on the stick and the flowers. And it's just a very unique experience. We did it I think it was our first full day in Mexico City. I arrived on a Friday and we went, I think that next day, last August. And it was interesting because I posted a picture on Twitter. And let me just say, when I came to Mexico, I was a lawyer in private practice in Washington before this. And I had a private Twitter account with 11 followers, all of whom were related to me. And I put up that picture of Xochimilco when I arrived in Mexico City on the ambassador's Twitter account. And that account just exploded almost immediately. I couldn't believe it. I'd never gotten more than 2 likes on a single tweet before. And within a day.
And one of those was your own like of your own tweet.
Well, that's probably true. He's got this wise guy in here. Within a few hours, I had more than 10,000 likes on those pictures of Xochimilco. And actually, that really brought home the power of social media. And, that for me, that's been a very important part of my job here has been communicating with people and seeing what's on their mind. And I've really enjoyed it. But it all started back with that trip to Xochimilco that I think, that really established a bond between our family and people here in Mexico. And I'm glad that, we're still working on strengthening that bond. But it's a place we definitely like to go back to whenever we have guests. I don't mean to take up all the time. Maybe my family wants to tell their impressions of Xochimilco.
Okay, why not?
I would actually like to go back there. I would like to go back there and see some of the working gardens.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that we were able. I mean, we just kind of went down the canal and then back.
I love the mariachi bands, like the floating mariachi bands. Those are cool.
But I would like to see how
they do it.
Mexico is trying to revitalize that area and how they're trying to bring back those gardens and to see some of that work that's taking place. I would like that.
Well, I want now to ask something that doesn't have to do with Mexico, but I would like Nathaniel to answer me. Are you watching, or were you watching yesterday the launching of the rocket that is going to be launched next Saturday because they had to stop it? Did you
No,
or did you not?
no, I did not, but I was
Ah.
following along on Twitter. There was, like live updates and everything. So I was getting Twitter notifications, but I wasn't watching it live.
And what do you think about what the U.S. is doing in that matter?
I think it's great. I mean, I think that any time the U.S. can kind of get out and broaden their horizons and, kind of just like spread their influence, I think it's helpful. I think the U.S. is a great country and it can help a lot of different places. And I think,
Space is one of
if
those.
the aliens need help, we're here to help them. So I just think it's good to, a lot of people think it's a waste of money, but I kind of think that it's
New frontiers.
Yeah, it's a new frontier, and it's I think it's really great.
You never know, because Earth is a planet that you don't know how many years will still be there. So we have to go out there and look for something else, right?
Exactly. Maybe Dad's next job might be the ambassador to Mars.
I'm very happy here in Mexico.
I'm not sure Mars will be the same, but
Okay.
Ambassador, and tell us, and on that note, and New Frontiers and everything, very little press gets out on the many projects that the government does in Mexico and has done for many, many, many years in terms of just helping out the society, building institutions. Can you tell us a little bit more about all that fantastic work that the U.S. does in Mexico?
Sure, and we've obviously are very, very committed to Mexico. It's very important for us as a country that Mexico be a prosperous and secure country. So, one of the things that I try to stress as ambassador is there's so many issues that are challenges for our country and also for Mexico, where we really share the same interests in working together to try to, again, improve the economic situation here in Mexico. I mean, that's good for Mexico. It's also good for us, and obviously reduces the pressure for people to migrate north and leave Mexico and come to the United States. In areas like security, it's obviously a big concern to people living in Mexico. We have extensive cooperation with Mexican authorities at all levels to try to help the Mexicans to strengthen not only their law enforcement systems, but also their legal systems. There's been a big emphasis in the last decade in particular on helping Mexico in its efforts to improve the rule of law and strengthen its criminal procedure systems. We bring down American judges to talk to their Mexican counterparts about some of the strengths and weaknesses in our system. And obviously we only do what the Mexicans invite us to do, but it's good to underscore that there's cooperation on a whole range of issues that go beyond kind of the sexy things in the headlines, but really we've been trying to work with Mexico in terms of its own institution building so it can strengthen these institutions like the courts, the police, to better, to make lives better for people here in Mexico, which again helps Mexico and also helps us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back to the children and Caroline.
That's what everybody's interested in. People aren't interested in me at all, Larry. Let me just tell you that. You got to know your audience better. They want to know the human interest side of this.
No, Mr. Ambassador, you are the one, but we don't have the chance to have the family all together, so we are going to stick to the...
a,
What?
this is a big exclusive. This is the first time they have done any kind of event like this. So everybody's bored. Like everybody has heard me say everything possible before. But this is an American Society exclusive.
Super.
Ambassador, but much more important than you have a family. So
Well,
really, Larry was very smart because he lured us into this with Raquel. You know, Raquel was
Very persuasive.
right. That was the fishing rod. They got us in and they reeled us back with Raquel. So,
okay. Well, first of all, really thank you, boys and Caroline and girls. I would like to ask you, where are you? What is your favorite sport? Being American, I know sports are so important. What would be your favorite sport to watch or to do?
All right, Julia, what is your?
The sport I play is figure skating, and I think it's very important that you love the sport that you do. And so I love figure skating. I've been figure skating for about 6 years, and the great thing is that in Mexico, they actually have a very good skating program. So I was able to skate a little bit. Now with the quarantine, it's kind of hard, but I try to do it in the house, like try to do some stuff off the ice. And it's been going great. And it's a great experience that I got to do it in Mexico as well.
Yeah. Julia had some very talented coaches in the Washington, D.C. area. And we didn't know if Julia would be able to find a skating program in Mexico, but Julia has found some great coaches in Mexico and have really helped her improve. It's interesting. They were very specific on some things that her coaches from the U.S. were not as strong on. So it was a great balance for her skating.
Great. And what about you, jovencito?
Now, my favorite sport to watch, American football, by far. Every Sunday, I sit in front of the TV and watch tons of football. But my favorite sport to compete in is fencing. So I've been fencing for over 10 years now. I've traveled nationally, internationally. It's really become like a huge part of my life. And I was a little bit concerned when I came down to Mexico whether I would be able to continue fencing at such a high level. And I was able to so they invited me to go to the Olympic Training Center, and I was able to come train with the people there, and it was really great. And once, the Corona hit, it kind of put a halt to that, but so be it. And while I was there, fencing has given me a lot of opportunities, and I thought that a cool way to kind of give back to people in Mexico is to start a para-fencing foundation. So no Corona, we had demonstrations for disabled people on how to fence, because it's such a great sport for them because all you have to use is your hand, and it was really great. I think there was no para fencing in Mexico, so I saw kind of an opportunity, and it's great. Visit our website, www.paraesprima.com.
That wasn't prepared, okay? And I'm so happy about
that was a setup.
Hey, I mean, if you give me a nugget like that, I'm going to take it.
Good.
Thank you so much for having us on today. And
we love you guys. You are so great, and meeting you through here was really a great experience. I know you have to go, but we love you. We love you, and really thinking that you are a family, such a united family with Mr. Ambassador. It's really lovely having you as our host, and I hope to see you many, many years in Mexico, okay? And all over.
Well, listen, we love you, and we love the Mexican people. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ambassador, and talking about sports, I mean, Mexicans love soccer, but they also love football, American football.
I realize that.
Right?
When I'm on Twitter, I get lots of questions, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that I'm not a particular sports guy. I'm a very unusual American in that sense, I guess. And so my son follows football much more than I do. It's been really interesting to see how strong American football is here in Mexico. I went to the NFL game in the Estadio Azteca last fall, and that place was full. I mean, I tell you, some of the worst traffic I've seen in Mexico, and this is saying something, was trying to get into the Estadio Azteca for that NFL game. Unfortunately, my understanding is that they're not going to do it this year because of the coronavirus issues, which is really too bad. I think it's a wonderful way to bring our societies closer together with interest in sports. And I would love to see an NFL team based in Mexico City at some point. I think that would be just a great example of the.
That is your next project.
Yep. Okay. Yes, exactly.
and there's quite a following. I mean, it's impressive to see. So not to mention any team names, but there's just a great following with several of the U.S. teams. Some are not that good, I'm sorry to say anymore, but there's certainly some winners there. And Mexico.
Who's your favorite, Larry?
I actually have.
Larry, that's what they say in diplomacy. That's where I say it's a trap. Be careful. That's all I'm saying.
So I must say they love cowboys in Mexico. I'm not that big of a cowboy fan, but definitely I think there's so many great teams. I mean, it's impressive to see how much of a following each one has. And Pittsburgh Steelers is huge in Mexico. And
the Vikings that they never do a thing, but that's my favorite.
Definitely. You lost half your audience, Raquel. I'm sorry to say.
and Mr. Ambassador, tell us. I mean, it's you manage probably the largest or one of the largest embassies in the world. Tell us about that. That must be challenging.
It certainly is. We have a great team, in our mission. It is one of the largest missions in the world, if not the largest, because it's not only the embassy here in Mexico City, which has somewhere about 1,200, 1,300 employees, but we then have 9 consulates general throughout the country and 9 consular agencies located in cities where there's a lot of American citizens. The consular agencies really primarily do services for American citizens, tourists and residents. And, it's one of the things that makes this job really exciting is that the U.S. relationship with Mexico is so deep and so rich and involves, not just the issues you see on the front page of the newspapers, migration and, trade, but things like water, right along the Colorado River, the Rio Grande. There are treaties about sharing that water. There are environmental issues. There are more government agencies, U.S. government agencies in Mission Mexico than in any other post in the world, just given all the ways in which our interests overlap. I mean, agricultural inspectors, our economies have become so intertwined in recent decades. And I see this process as continuing. I think, Mexico is going to only grow in importance, in terms of vis-a-vis the U.S. as these economic ties increase now, as the new treaty is going to go into effect in a little over a month. The family ties are much, much deeper than they were, even 40 or 50 years ago. And I think, it was interesting. I just put up a tweet on Memorial Day, was just a few days ago about the American Cemetery in Mexico City, which for our listeners there, for the American Society, it's interesting. It's a little bit of a hidden place. It's just off the Circuito Interior, not that far from the embassy, Chancery building, a few blocks back. And, that cemetery includes a lot of the graves of Americans, people from the American community in Mexico in the last half of the 19th century. It was established in 1851 after the Mexican War and remained open until 1923. Since then, it hasn't taken any new internments, but it's a very special place for the American community. But my point was that I brought up the American Cemetery on Memorial Day because I visited there, and it was really striking to me how many responses I got from Mexicans who say, well, I have a cousin who served in the U.S. Armed Forces and was killed in Iraq, or I have a friend. And, I think the personal bonds between our countries have just gotten so much deeper over the last few years. It really hit me at a very personal level when I was reviewing the responses to my Memorial Day tweets. And I see that process, frankly, as irreversible and deepening. And I think that's a very healthy thing for our countries. I think our relations have really matured a lot in the last 50 years. So that was an interesting anecdote for me. And, it's interesting because I also saw some, in the 1970s, when they actually built or expanded the Circuito Interior, they destroyed half the cemetery to make it into part of that highway. And, all the graves were there. They had to disinter all the remains and just, reinter them in a columbarium in the new cemetery, which is only half the size of the old one. And, at that point, they were pretty
messy.
It was pretty messy, yeah. And I think, I was reading some of the communications between the embassy and the Mexican government at that time. And it was really a very different relationship back in the 70s. I mean, this was kind of the heyday of the it was bad. And some of the people said, well, take your bones and go back to the United States. And there was a real, I don't know, just a lack of goodwill in the relationship. And I felt, wow, it was interesting reading that, because I felt like now it's so much more positive. And I think, we've obviously had our historical differences with Mexico, but I think now there's just a much broader understanding that we're on the same team. We have, disagreements as members of the same family do, but, that ultimately our destiny really lies together. And reading those cables from the 1970s, I didn't get that feeling at all. So I'm sorry to give you that long answer, but it was actually a very interesting experience for me to look at those cables and at the same time look at the responses to my tweet.
Raquel, please.
So I speak, not you,
yes.
because
please,
the children and the family has gone. But well, for me, it has been just wonderful meeting this impressive family and being with you guys. And also want to say that Frank Devlin was one of my best friends, and I cannot believe he's gone. And that we really appreciate very much what he has done with American and Mexican people, because the Rotary has just went off because of him. And thank you again, Mr. Ambassador, and the gorgeous family. And
thank you.
And additionally, and echoing what Raquel said, Frank, as one of our board members and very active in the community, shows really all this integration between Mexicans and Americans. And before we go, Mr. Ambassador, tell us a little bit about this huge American community in Mexico. You've had an opportunity to talk to, obviously, Americans in Mexico City, but you traveled beyond Mexico City and met a lot of these American friends and American citizens throughout the country. Tell us your experience there.
Well, Mexico has by far the largest community of Americans living outside the United States of any country in the world. Not even to mention then obviously by far the largest number of visitors and tourists as well. So, we have a very vibrant American community here, and it's very diverse. I mean, sometimes you get the people who've come here when they've retired from the States and they maybe came on vacation once to Mexico and fell in love with the place and wanted to buy property here and retire here. You get some American citizens who were, born in the United States to Mexican parents, moved back to Mexico and really, our dual nationals may actually identify more as Mexicans in their everyday lives. You get people who are here on business for a few years. You get all kinds of different people. Frank Devlin is a great example. I mean, he grew up, along the border and really made Mexico his life and his home. And I think there's many Americans who have married Mexicans and settled down here. It's a great community. I think in a sense that, it's such a big community. We don't really even know how many we are. Some people estimate, I mean, it's pretty much, I think, agreed that it's north of 1 million, maybe 1.5 million. I've heard even high estimates up towards 2 million Americans who live in Mexico. So, that's actually a not insubstantial chunk of Mexican population. So I think it just again shows, the close nature of our relations. But because our community is so big and so diverse, I think sometimes we really struggle to do things as a community because we're spread out all over Mexico. Obviously, there's certain pockets, Lake Chapala, San Miguel de Allende, Los Cabos, Mexico City, obviously the border towns where there are, particular concentrations of American citizens. But, I would certainly like to see us, do more as a community and, see all the different faces of our community. And that's why I really want to commend the American Society, which has been, working on bringing our community together for more than 75 years now, since 1942. And, I very much, was excited to get to work with the American Society. I think I've told you that my father was a diplomat as well. And so I grew up in South America and really I spent 5 years of my childhood in Paraguay, where we had a very small American community, but it was a very cohesive American community. We did lots of events together as a community, and there was a real feeling of belonging to that community as a distinct community with all kinds of activities. And it makes me very happy that the American Society is trying to foster that same sense of community here in Mexico City in a virtual way. Again, we have so many Americans here. There's a very popular restaurant here that's owned by an American, and they do trivia night for in English for Americans and their friends, and there are just so many ways to come together as a community. And I think there's a lot of people who enjoy every once in a while getting together with other Americans and talking about what the life is like as an American in Mexico and our experience here.
What's the name? So tell us so we'll know, and you do the ad complete.
Sure. The restaurant is Pinche Gringo. It's sorry, that's the name of the restaurant. I'm just saying that. And it's wonderful. We got to know the owner, and he gave us a tour of behind the scenes at the restaurant, and they've really worked with their Mexican staff to come up with a great kind of American style barbecue. And, it's great to see that, that relationship in action at that very kind of granular human level. And obviously, as your questions already indicate, Mexicans love food. I know I get more questions about food than any other topic on Twitter. And, I think that's one way we can come together. I'm sure there are other American restaurants in Mexico City as well, but, I think it's one of the ways we come together. I would actually love to hear from you all at the American Society, and you in turn, reaching out, as kind of the liaison between, me and our embassy and our mission and the American community here more generally. What can we do to bring the American community, more into some of the activities with the embassy? For instance, the 4th of July this year, I had planned to do some, events to invite the entire American community to get together, for a flag raising and other events like that. I think obviously now with the pandemic, it's going to be very hard for us to do an event where we have lots of people together. But, I think I'm still trying to come up with some ideas for what might be interesting and fun for people to do that we can do as a virtual event. So please, reach out to the community. Please send along any suggestions that you might have in terms of what we can do. I've reached out to other American ambassadors in countries across the globe to ask them what they are doing, and trying to get ideas, because I think we've got to obviously be creative in this time. We're all trying to cope with living our lives in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, which is very challenging. Here we are. One of the things that I've learned in the pandemic is how to use Zoom. I'd never done this before. And, now, pretty much every day I'm on Zoom calls or, Blue Jeans calls or whatever. There's all these new for me at least, apps. And, I think it's a great way for our community to get together. But obviously, once you're talking about going virtual, you're competing with really a whole world of entertainment. So you got to be especially good to get those eyeballs on your site. But, if there's things that folks in the American community would like to do to come together, again, I think this is a challenge for us all, the pandemic. And, how do we kind of support our community and keep everybody strong during the pandemic is a challenge. So much more is going online. The other day, I got some friends from the States who invited me to do a game of virtual Jeopardy over Zoom, where they were asking the questions. And, it was fun to kind of see everybody's faces again. And I hope that we as a community can, do activities. I'm delighted to hear what you at the American Society have been doing with your wine tasting webinars and other events. And Raquel, I know you're the head of the events committee, and I'm grateful to you and Larry for really reinvigorating this society and really creating a forum for us to come together in the 21st century with modern technology. I think that the pandemic, frankly, makes it more important than ever to be creative about ways to keep our community connected, and so I would love, particularly for those in the community who are more tech savvy, to get some suggestions for what people might enjoy. Understanding that we're competing with all of the entertainment that's available on the internet, so we've got to make ourselves more interesting than a Netflix movie to get the eyeballs.
Well, now we have our homework, right, Larry?
Exactly. And additionally, it's been...
We had 4th of July big event that is not going to happen, I think.
Right.
Which was really...
And actually, adding to what Raquel says, that makes me remember we had, and you and I have talked about it, Mr. Ambassador. We had back in 1962 JFK come to our 4th of July, right? And naturally 4th of July.
It doesn't get better than getting the president down here. So I don't think I can promise that for this year. So not that.
Maybe for the 80th anniversary of the American Senate.
I think we can get the president to come down for the 80th. Says, okay, I'll try.
and definitely those are events that obviously are close to the heart at the American Society. Election night is another one that we do, totally nonpartisan, and having both Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whoever wants to join Mexicans and Americans. So we'll definitely put our heads together to see what we can do with technology. And as you pointed out, Raquel and her fantastic events committee has done a great job. Debbie Beard, who's a wine connoisseur, has done fantastic in taking us to California and trying great wines like Camus and Robert Mondavi and so forth. So we're all learning quite a bit in these times, but exactly, and we're really excited because there's so many things going on. We also have a very active organizations committee with 108 nonprofit associations that we work with, and it's impressive what they do there and the work that these organizations do. But naturally, you've been great, and I have to ask a final question. So when we did that you were gracious enough, we did that welcoming party for you. So what did you think? I never asked you, what did you think of the mariachis? Because that was a surprise.
Oh, they loved it.
It was a great surprise. I almost fell off the stage. I mean, it was really a great event. I mean, I have to say, to walk into that huge ballroom full of people, I just felt so connected to the American community here in Mexico. That's the day I think I met Raquel and there's
Frank.
I mean, there were, it was great to meet a lot of folks who really are just play a critical role in the life of our community. I think it's great to do things like that every once in a while, just to bring everybody together. And so, I'm very grateful to you guys for organizing that. I go to a lot of official events, you can imagine. And I think that one was one of the warmest. And, when the mariachis came on and we sang Mexico lindo y querido, like that was, a very emotional moment. And, it's obviously, I'm very honored to have this opportunity to represent the United States in Mexico. And I realize that I am just one in a link of many ambassadors that stretch back way into the past and will stretch way into the future. And, during my tenure here, however brief or long it may be, I would really like to do everything I can to strengthen our community and, bring us together. And it's not easy. Again, in the internet age, I think I think communities generally are hard to keep up because everybody just does their own individual thing on the internet, and people are less interested now in kind of having this community when there's a million virtual communities they can join online. So I think that's a challenge for us, but I think at some level it's still very valuable for people to establish these links of the community in Mexico City, make these connections, networking. I think we need, there's got to be more Frank Devlins out there in the American community. And I want to kind of meet the next Frank Devlin. And, obviously we have two people who are a lot like Frank Devlin here. Both Larry and Raquel are very extroverted and are great. But I think it's very important to have a mechanism like the American Society to, be able to be a clearinghouse and a platform for our community issues. Let me also just emphasize that, we at the embassy, I think, really want to be supportive of the American community, and particularly now during the pandemic. I have been putting out videos on Twitter every week directed specifically to the American community in Mexico that respond to the most common questions that we get from the American community on our email address, acsmexicocity@state.gov, and our phone number, which I don't know if somebody from my team can remind me what that phone number is. It's a Mexican phone number that if any American citizen has any question, they should know that they can always reach out to our mission to support them. I just got a call from an American citizen friend of mine here who was completing some real estate transactions in the United States and needed to have some documents notarized. And he was trying to run all over Mexico City, trying to get documents notarized in the middle of the pandemic, and kind of as a last resort reached out to me. And we're going to be able to help him through our consular section at the embassy get those documents notarized. But, I want everybody in the American community to understand that we are available here for you. And again, we have a 24/7 phone number as well as the email address. David McCauley, do you happen to have that phone number handy so I can just give it so that everybody has it, can write it down?
Sure, sir. They can call. Hold on, I should have it handy, shouldn't I?
David McCauley, by the way, is our consul general here in Mexico City, a great officer and a great resource. And if you send me a question on Twitter, if you have it, I now have a procedure for looping in David's team on consular questions. We know that people have a lot of these consular questions in our community, and again,
hopefully we're gonna host a seminar with David so we can go into detail about so many issues regarding consular section. But the embassy's switchboard is 5080-2000. That's the U.S. Embassy switchboard for anyone that might need additional help.
But we actually have a special number for American citizens in Mexico who require American citizen services or have questions. David, do you have that? I say it in my video every week. You think?
Yeah, you do. I'm trying to pull it up right now, sir. But I'll send it to Larry right afterwards. How's that?
Super.
I have to say something. I just really think that Mr. Ambassador has been one of the outstanding ambassadors we've ever had. And I'm talking since experience because I met a lot, but this ambassador is out of this world, and I want to make it really clear.
I agree. I mean, we've not only are you a great professional, Mr. Ambassador, but you're tons of fun, and it's always great to host you and do things together with you. And ever since hearing you sing, I mean, that was impressive. So
my pleasure. Look, as I grew up, as I said a moment ago, as an expatriate myself. So for me, this is kind of a return to my roots, and I think I have a very natural simpatia for Americans who grow up in other parts of the world and the special opportunities and challenges that presents. I mean, I have to say, for me, it was the greatest blessing of my life to have that opportunity to, as a young child, learn another language, another culture. And I think it's great that people in the American community here are giving that same opportunity to their children. And again, we want to be here to support the community. So let's all keep in touch. Thank you so much for this invitation. It was great to talk to you guys. Love the community here. Love you guys. And hasta pronto.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador Raquel. Thank you very much. And continue seeing us. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr.
Bye-bye.
Ambassador. Take
Bye-bye.
care.